Somewhere in the frozen north of Russia, there is a hole in the ground. It goes down almost 8 miles. That is deeper than Mount Everest is tall, flipped upside down and buried in the dirt. Engineers spent almost 20 years drilling it. Then, all of a sudden, they stopped. It was not because they ran out of money. It was not because they got bored. They stopped because the planet itself started fighting back. Down there, solid metal bent like rubber. Hard rock turned into something close to thick syrup. Scientists pulled up tiny living things that had been buried for 2 billion years, and strange sounds came up through the cables. Sounds so eerie that people across the entire world swore they were listening to screams from hell itself. So what really happened in that hole? And why? When humans can send robots to Mars and land cameras on a comet, can we not even punch a clean hole through our own planet? The truth involves rock that bends, water that should not exist, and a recording that terrified an entire generation. Stick around, because the real story is even stranger than the legend. Section 1. The hole that broke the rules. Back in the 1970s, scientists in the Soviet Union picked a quiet, snowy spot called the Kola Peninsula and decided to do something nobody had ever tried before. They were not drilling for oil. They were not searching for gold or diamonds. They simply wanted to know one thing. How deep could humans actually go before the planet said no? This was not just a science project either. It was part of a quiet race. Other countries around the world were also chasing the dream of digging deep, hoping to be the first to reach new layers of the planet that no human eye had ever seen. Whoever went deepest would not just win bragging rights. They would rewrite the textbooks on what our planet is actually made of. For the first several miles, everything went exactly the way the engineers planned. The drill bit chewed through rock, the pipes lowered down smoothly, and the project looked like a simple matter of patience. But patience is exactly what this hole demanded. Drilling even a few hundred feet could take weeks. The drill had to spin a long, heavy pipe made of dozens of connected steel sections, and every single piece had to survive the trip down and back up again. By the time the hole passed 4 miles down, something started to feel off. Past 7 miles, it felt completely wrong. The temperature was supposed to rise in a steady, predictable way the deeper they went. Scientists had done the math. At that depth, they expected something close to 100 degrees Celsius, which is about the boiling point of water. Instead, their instruments read 180 degrees. That is hot enough to make some metals lose their strength. The sensors built to handle the heat were failing one after another. Picture a hole so deep that if you dropped a Mount Everest into it standing straight up, it still would not reach the bottom, and you would still have more than a mile to go. That is the kind of depth we are talking about. The final number the drill reached was just over 12,000 kilometers worth of digging in total length, with a straight-down depth of about 12.25 kilometers. To this day, more than 30 years later, nobody has ever drilled a deeper hole into solid rock. To put that number in everyday terms, think about the longest road trip you have ever taken in a car. Now imagine that same distance, except every single mile of it is packed straight down into the earth, through rock that gets hotter and heavier the further you go. There is no sunlight down there, no air, and no way out, except slowly pulling miles of heavy steel pipe back up the way it came. But getting that deep meant fighting a planet that did not want to be opened up. And the deeper the drill went, the stranger the fight became. Before we go further down with these engineers, if stories like this get your brain buzzing, this is exactly the kind of mystery this channel loves digging into. We are about to explain how solid rock can act like melted candy under enough pressure, and that is honestly one of the tamer surprises waiting below. So hit that subscribe button now, because there is a lot more buried beneath the surface of this story, and you will not want to miss where it goes next. To understand just how strange things got, we need to look at what happens to rock itself once you push it past its limits. Most people assume rock just stays rock no matter how deep you go. As you are about to see, that assumption falls apart fast. Section 2. When solid rock turns to syrup. Here is something most people never think about. Rock seems like the toughest, most solid thing on Earth. You can hit it with a hammer and barely leave a scratch. But take that same rock, bury it 12 kilometers down, and crush it under a pressure equal to 1,000 times the air pressure at sea level, and it stops acting solid at all. At that depth, the granite the drill was cutting through began behaving almost like thick honey. It would not crack and break the way rock does near the surface. Instead, it would slowly ooze and shift, squeezing in around the drill from every side. Engineers had expected tough, dry rock the whole way down. What they got instead was rock that almost seemed alive, pressing back against every inch they carved out. The drilling equipment itself was incredible. Picture a tower holding up a column of steel pipe that weighed hundreds of tons, stretching down for miles, with a spinning bit tipped in diamonds at the very bottom. Diamonds are the hardest natural material on the planet, so in normal conditions that bit should slice through stone almost like a hot knife through butter. But down in that heat and pressure, the metal would overheat in minutes. The bit would dull, crack, or simply stop turning. Think about how strange that is for a second. The hardest material known to humans, something jewelers use to cut glass, was getting worn down by rock in a matter of hours. That alone told scientists they were dealing with conditions nothing on the surface could prepare them for. Now, here is the part that made engineers want to pull their hair out. Every time the drill bit wore down, which happened constantly, the entire pipe had to be pulled all the way back up to the surface to swap it out. That sounds simple, but remember, this pipe was miles long and weighed as much as a small ship. Hauling it up and lowering a fresh one back down could eat up an entire day of non-stop work. And during that one day, the planet would quietly try to heal itself. The soft, syrupy rock around the hole would slowly slump and ooze back into the empty space the drill had just carved out. By the time the new bit reached the bottom, the hole had partly closed itself again. The crew would have to re-drill stretches of rock they had already cleared the day before. It was like digging a tunnel through wet sand at the beach, except this tunnel was 7 miles underground and hotter than boiling water. Sometimes the pressure and heat were too much for the steel itself. The pipe would twist like a wet noodle, and in the worst moments, it would simply snap somewhere deep inside the hole. Pulling broken metal out from miles underground is nearly impossible. When that happened, months of work were gone in an instant, and the team had to start a brand new path just a short distance away from the ruined one. Some crews lost entire sections of pipe this way, leaving expensive equipment buried forever, sitting somewhere in the dark like a sunken ship nobody could ever recover. Every snapped pipe was a reminder that the deeper they pushed, the less control they actually had. The scientists slowly realized something huge. The deep layers of our planet were not the dry, simple, predictable rock that textbooks described. The crust beneath our feet was far messier, far more active, and far more alive than anyone had guessed. That last word, alive, turned out to be more accurate than anyone expected, because when the crew finally managed to pull rock samples up from the deepest layers, they found something that should not have been there at all. Section 3. Life, where nothing should live. Before drilling began, geologists were fairly confident about one thing. They believed that past a certain depth, the rock would turn bone dry. Water, they thought, simply could not soak down that far through solid stone. It made sense on paper. Water needs cracks and gaps to travel through, and under that much pressure, those gaps should have been crushed shut long before reaching 7 kilometers down. The drill proved them completely wrong. Instead of dry rock, the crew kept hitting pockets that were soaked. This was not rainwater or seawater. It was a hot, bubbling mineral soup, trapped under pressure so intense that the moment it touched open air in the pipe, it could flash into steam strong enough to damage equipment. Nobody expected liquid water to exist at that depth, let alone in the amounts they were finding. Then came the discovery that genuinely shocked the scientific world. Buried in rock samples pulled from more than 6.5 kilometers down, researchers found the fossilized remains of microscopic living things. Not one or two strange specks either. They identified 24 different ancient species of tiny organisms, preserved inside rock that was around 2 billion years old. Stop and think about that for a second. 2 billion years is so long ago that complex life like plants and animals did not even exist yet. And these fragile microscopic fossils had somehow survived being buried under crushing pressure and roasting heat for that entire stretch of time, sitting quietly in rock that scientists assumed was far too hostile for anything to have ever lived in. This discovery did more than surprise a few researchers. It forced scientists to rethink how deep life on Earth could actually reach, and how far back in time living things had managed to survive in places once thought to be completely empty. If life could exist and leave traces this deep inside our own planet, it raised a much bigger question about how tough and adaptable life might be anywhere in the universe. Think about it this way. If the harshest, hottest, most crushing environment we could find on our own planet still held traces of ancient life, then maybe the planets and moons we once wrote off as too extreme for anything to survive deserve a second look. A discovery buried 7 kilometers underground in Russia ended up changing how scientists think about the entire universe. But the deep Earth was not just hiding old fossils, it was also venting something far more dangerous. Along with the strange water, pockets of flammable gas began rising up through the hole. Hydrogen and methane seeped out steadily, filling the air around the drilling site with an invisible fire risk. One stray spark near these gases could have triggered a serious accident. Workers had to constantly watch their instruments, because in an environment soaked with flammable gas, even a tiny mistake could turn catastrophic in seconds. Crews wore heavy protective gear and kept detectors running around the clock, watching numbers climb and fall like a countdown clock nobody wanted to see hit 0. Every shift down at that hole carried real risk, not from monsters or myths, but from invisible gas that could ignite without warning. What the team had stumbled into was essentially a hidden breathing system buried inside our planet, full of gas, heat, water, and the leftover fingerprints of ancient life, all sealed away for billions of years until a drill bit finally cracked it open. While some scientists were thrilled about the fossils and the gas pockets, another team working on the same project was hearing something through their headphones that none of them could fully explain. Section 4. The sounds that scared the world. To keep track of how the drill was performing deep underground, engineers lowered sensitive microphones and sound sensors into the hole. The main goal was simple. They wanted to listen to how the drill bit was cutting and pick up on tiny shifts and cracks happening in the rock layers below. What they did not expect was for those recordings to spark one of the strangest rumors in modern history. At some point, stories began spreading through newspapers in the West, claiming that scientists at this very site had lowered a microphone deep into the hole and recorded actual screaming, as if they had drilled straight down into hell. The story spread like wildfire. People shared it at school, on early internet forums, and through word of mouth, each retelling adding a few more spooky details. Within a short time, millions of people around the world had heard some version of this terrifying tale. What made the legend stick was how believable it sounded. The story claimed real scientists, a real drilling site, and a real recording, which made it feel far more convincing than your average campfire tale. People wanted to believe that somewhere deep below their feet, something ancient and evil was waiting. It tapped into a fear that is almost built into us, the fear of what hides in the dark places we cannot see. Here is the truth, and it is honestly almost as wild as the legend itself. The famous screaming recording that went viral was not real. It turned out to be a mashup of sound effects, partly pulled from a horror movie soundtrack, stitched together and passed off as something it was never actually supposed to be. It was, in plain terms, a hoax that got completely out of control. But that does not mean the real sounds recorded in the hole were boring. Far from it. Sound behaves in strange ways under that much pressure and heat. Dense rock acts almost like a giant musical instrument, bending and stretching sound waves until they come out distorted and unfamiliar. The hum of machinery, the grinding of the drill bit, and the pulsing of pumps pushing fluid down the pipe could all blend together into low groans and sudden screeches that, if you heard them with no explanation, might genuinely give you chills. Imagine standing in a quiet control room on a freezing night, headphones on, listening to a low rumble suddenly cut off by a sharp metallic shriek, knowing the sound is coming from miles beneath your boots. You would not need a movie soundtrack to feel a chill run down your spine. The real recordings on their own were unsettling enough. The project's director, a man named David Guberman, later spoke about some of these strange moments with a bit of humor, but he admitted plenty of things happened on site that were hard to explain right away. In one incident, the drill suddenly dropped into open space where solid rock was supposed to be. This caused a sharp spike in pressure and a loud, sudden acoustic boom that rattled through the equipment. It turned out the team had broken into a hidden pocket where gas under extreme pressure had been slowly eating away at the rock from the inside, carving out an empty space nobody knew was there. Moments like that froze the entire crew in place. And oddly enough, total silence on the speakers often scared workers more than a loud bang. Silence usually meant something worse, like a total loss of communication or a major equipment failure happening miles below their feet. So while the famous Screams from Hell story turned out to be fake, the real story underneath it was almost as eerie. The cola hole proved that drilling straight down through solid continental rock was brutally difficult, maybe even close to impossible past a certain point. So scientists turned their attention somewhere they hoped would be easier. They looked toward the bottom of the ocean. Section 5. Chasing the Center of the Earth. Here is a fact that sounds backwards at first. On dry land, the crust of our planet can be as thick as 40 kilometers, but under the ocean, that same crust shrinks down to somewhere between 5 and 7 kilometers. On paper, that looks like a shortcut. If the goal is to reach the mantle, the hot, thick layer that makes up most of our planet's volume, drilling through thin ocean floor seems like the obvious choice. In the 1960s, a bold American project called Project Mahol set out to test exactly that idea. The plan was to drill straight down through the floor of the Pacific Ocean, working from a ship floating thousands of meters above the seabed. Just think about how hard that actually is. The crew first had to lower a drill bit through 3.5 kilometers of open ocean water before it even touched the seafloor. Only after reaching bottom could the real drilling begin. It is a bit like trying to drill a perfectly straight hole into a concrete slab while standing on the roof of a skyscraper, with the wind constantly pushing you side to side. Now add in the fact that the ocean never sits still. Waves rock the ship, currents pull at the cables, and even a small shift in position can bend the drill pipe miles below the surface. Every part of this mission demanded a level of precision that pushed 1960s technology to its absolute limit. During testing, the crew ran into a genuinely terrifying moment. A powerful underwater current that nobody had detected beforehand began pushing against the ship with tremendous force. The steel cables anchoring the vessel in place stretched tight as the entire drilling tower started leaning. If that column of pipe had snapped under the strain, falling chunks of steel weighing several tons could have smashed straight through the bottom of the ship. Only quick thinking from the captain, who used the ship's engines to fight against the current, kept the situation from turning into a disaster. Even when the drill did reach the ocean floor safely, the rock down there was no pushover either. Instead of soft sand or loose sediment, Crews often hit dense volcanic rock nearly as tough as some of the hardest stone on Earth. Drill bits wore down within hours, and every time a bit needed replacing, the crew faced an incredibly tricky task, lowering a new drill back down through miles of moving water and somehow guiding it into the exact same narrow opening they had drilled before, like trying to thread a needle from the top of a tall building while someone shakes the needle below. Decades later, Japanese engineers pushed this idea even further with an advanced ship called the Chikyu, essentially a floating drilling platform the size of a 30-story building. It used powerful computer-controlled thrusters to hold its exact position above the drilling site, accurate down to just a few centimeters, even while floating on open ocean. Yet even this incredible technology ran into trouble. In certain spots where two tectonic plates meet beneath the sea, gas pressure underground proved so extreme that it pushed scorching hot mud straight back up through the hole, clogging equipment and bringing operations to a stop. In the end, both attempts revealed the same surprising truth. The supposedly thinner, easier ocean crust turned out to be just as stubborn as the thick rock found on land. To this day, no one has ever drilled completely through either type of crust to reach the mantle below. While some engineers were struggling to dig narrow holes, other crews on dry land were doing the opposite, carving out massive open pits so big they are visible from space. The Mirny diamond mine in Russia plunges more than 500 meters down, and it is so deep that flying aircraft directly over it is officially banned. That rule exists because of a genuinely strange and dangerous bit of physics. Cold, heavy air pooling inside the pit creates strong downward air currents. A helicopter flying too close can lose lift almost instantly and get pulled down into the pit before the pilot can react. It sounds like something out of a movie, but it is real, measurable physics, the kind of invisible danger that makes engineers treat these massive pits with the same respect they would give a live volcano. Massive mining trucks the size of 3-story buildings crawl along roads carved into the walls of these pits, looking like tiny ants from above. From the rim, a worker could watch one of these giant machines and barely make out its headlights. If brakes failed on a loaded truck going downhill, there would be almost no way to stop tons of rolling steel before it reached the bottom. In the United States, the Bingham Canyon copper mine in Utah is so enormous that in 2013, a single landslide sent 65 million tons of rock crashing down all at once, an event powerful enough to register on earthquake sensors. Yet for all their size, even our biggest man-made pits barely scratch the surface compared to the true thickness of Earth's crust. So why did humanity essentially stop trying to dig straight down? The honest answer is that we hit a hard physical wall. The deeper a drill goes, the heavier and longer the pipe holding it becomes. Past about 15 kilometers down, steel pipe starts to fail simply from the weight of its own length, long before it even reaches truly extreme heat. To go any deeper, engineers would need entirely new materials that have not even been invented yet, along with cooling systems strong enough to survive temperatures close to 300 degrees. It is a strange kind of limit. We are not stopped by a lack of imagination or a lack of effort. We are stopped by the basic rules of physics, the same rules that make a long rope eventually snap under its own weight if you hang it down a deep enough well. No amount of money or willpower can rewrite those rules. Someone first has to invent the materials that can survive conditions hotter than a kitchen oven turned up far past its limit, while also being squeezed by pressure heavy enough to crush a modern submarine. Even so, scientists have not given up on the dream. A new effort, sometimes called the Moholy to Mantle Project, hopes to finally make direct contact with the mantle using autonomous robotic drilling systems built to survive conditions no human crew ever could. The idea is to send machines where no person could safely go, letting robots handle the heat, the pressure, and the unpredictable rock that broke so much equipment in the past. If it succeeds, it would be one of the riskiest and most groundbreaking experiments in scientific history. Nobody fully knows what will happen the moment that barrier finally breaks. Some researchers even worry that puncturing through into the mantle could trigger unexpected geological shifts in the surrounding area, releasing pressure that has been building for millions of years in a single, sudden burst. Others believe it could finally answer questions about our planet that have puzzled scientists for over a century. Questions about how Earth formed, how its layers move, and what other secrets might still be locked away in the rock beneath us. Either way, one thing is certain. The moment a drill finally punches into the mantle for the first time in human history, it will be a moment nobody on this planet has ever witnessed before. We have sent machines to land on Mars, and we have flown cameras past the edge of our solar system. Yet right here, underneath our own feet, there is still a layer of our planet that no human has ever truly touched. The deepest hole in human history only managed to scratch the very top of it. Outro. So the next time someone says we have explored everything there is to explore, remember this. We have not even made it through our own planet's outer shell. We have mapped the surface of the moon in more detail than the rock sitting a few miles beneath our own cities. That is how much mystery is still hiding right under our feet. If this story blew your mind, smash that like button and subscribe, because there are way more wild, true stories about our planet coming your way soon. Also, hit the notification bell so you never miss one. Now I want to hear from you. If scientists really did break through into the mantle one day, do you think it would lead to an amazing discovery, or do you think it could be a disaster waiting to happen? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you want to go even deeper into Earth's strangest secrets, check out the related videos on screen right now.